Modern freezers fail in a heartbeat, but Amish families have kept meat fresh for decades without a single watt of power. While most rely on machines, they rely on time and few basic ingredients. Their methods don't just preserve food, they preserve freedom from modern dependence. Here's how they've mastered the art of storing meat that lasts over 20 years. Salt has been saving meat since before anyone thought to write down recipes. The Amish pack their meat in layers of coarse salt, creating what looks like a meat sandwich where salt is both the bread and the filling. This process pulls out every drop of moisture from the meat over the course of several weeks. Without moisture, bacteria simply cannot survive. They need water to grow and multiply, and salt makes sure they don't get a single drop of it. The technique is straightforward, but requires patience. Fresh meat gets buried in salt, then more salt goes on top, then the process repeats until the entire piece is completely covered. The salt crystals work their way into the meat fibers, drawing water out through osmosis. As days pass, you'll notice liquid pooling at the bottom of the container. That's the moisture leaving the meat, taking with it any chance of spoilage. After a few weeks, the meat becomes firm and significantly lighter. The transformation is remarkable when you consider that meat is roughly 75% water. Bacteria looking at salt-cured meat must feel like someone showing up to a pool party only to find out it's been drained and filled with concrete instead. Once the curing is complete, the meat gets hung in a cool, dry room where air can flow around it freely. Airflow is critical because any remaining surface moisture needs to evaporate. The Amish typically use sheds or specially designed rooms with screens to keep insects out while letting air move through. Temperature matters too. The ideal range sits between 50 to 60 degrees, cool enough to prevent bacterial growth, but not so cold that air stops circulating properly. The hanging period can last months or even years. As long as the meat stays dry and protected from bugs, it remains perfectly edible. Many Amish families have meat hanging in their storage rooms that's been there for 5 years or more. The texture changes, becoming denser and chewier, but the nutritional value stays intact. Pork works exceptionally well with this method, as do beef and venison. The fat content in pork actually helps create an additional protective layer as it hardens during the curing process. Different cuts of meat respond differently to salt curing. Larger, thicker pieces take longer, but often yield better results because the salt has more time to work its way completely through. Smaller cuts cure faster, but require more careful monitoring to prevent oversalting. The Amish have learned through generations which cuts work best for which purposes. A thick ham might cure for 2 months, while thinner bacon strips need only 3 weeks. Some city people pay premium prices for prosciutto without realizing their great-grandparents were making the same thing in their basement for about $3 worth of salt. Salt curing doesn't just preserve meat, it concentrates the flavor. The removal of water means what remains is pure protein and fat, intensely meaty and savory. Before cooking, the meat needs to be soaked in water to remove excess salt, but even after soaking, it retains more flavor than fresh meat ever could. The soaking time depends on how long the meat was cured and how salty you want the final result. Some people prefer a saltier taste and soak for just an hour or two, while others want milder flavor and soak overnight with several water changes. This method has kept families fed through harsh winters for centuries. The beauty of salt curing lies in its reliability. As long as you use enough salt and keep the meat dry, the process works every single time. There's no guessing, no complicated steps that might go wrong. Salt does what salt has always done, and the results speak for themselves. But salt alone isn't always enough when you want that meat to last decades, not just years. There's another layer of protection that takes preservation to an entirely different level. Smoke does more than just make meat taste incredible. It creates an actual chemical barrier on the surface that bacteria, mold, and insects want nothing to do with. The Amish start with meat that's already been salted, then move it into a smokehouse where it hangs over smoldering wood for days or sometimes weeks. The wood choice matters. Hickory gives a strong, bold flavor. Oak provides something milder and more subtle. Applewood adds a touch of sweetness that works beautifully with pork. The smoking process happens slowly at low temperatures, usually between 70 to 90 degrees. This isn't cooking the meat, it's treating it. The smoke contains compounds like phenols and acids that bond to the meat's surface, forming a protective coating. This coating is what keeps harmful organisms away. The color changes too, turning from pink or red to a deep brown or mahogany. That darkening tells you the smoke has done its job. Temperature control requires constant attention. Too hot and you cook the meat instead of preserving it. Too cool and the smoke doesn't penetrate deeply enough. The Amish manage this by adjusting airflow and the amount of wood they use. Small, steady amounts of smoke work better than large bursts. The goal is consistent exposure over a long period, not quick results. Building a proper smokehouse doesn't require fancy materials or modern technology. The Amish construct theirs using basic lumber, often recycled from old barns or buildings. The structure needs good ventilation at the top to let smoke escape while maintaining enough density inside to coat the meat thoroughly. A small fire pit at the bottom, often just a metal pan filled with wood chips or chunks, provides the smoke source. The meat hangs from rafters or hooks several feet above the fire, far enough that heat doesn't cook it, but close enough that smoke reaches it consistently. A smokehouse fire is probably the only time someone can say their dinner has been cooking for 3 weeks, and nobody questions whether they forgot about it. After smoking, the meat cools completely before storage. Rushed cooling can trap moisture inside, which defeats the entire purpose of preservation. Once cool, the meat goes into cloth bags or wooden boxes. These containers allow continued airflow while protecting against dust and pests. The cloth bags are particularly clever because they breathe while still keeping insects out. Wooden boxes serve a similar function, with gaps that let air circulate without creating openings large enough for bugs to enter. Properly smoked meat stored in dry conditions can last decades. The combination of salt and smoke creates a double defense system that almost nothing can penetrate. The flavor deepens over time too, becoming richer and more complex as the months pass. Families will often smoke large quantities of meat in late fall, then rely on those stores through the entire winter and well into the following year. The timing of smoking matters as much as the technique itself. Late fall provides ideal conditions because temperatures stay cool enough to prevent spoilage during the multi-day smoking process, but not so cold that fires become difficult to maintain. The cooler air also means insects are less active, reducing the risk of contamination during the vulnerable period when meat is first hung and not yet fully protected by its smoke coating. The only downside to smoked meat is explaining to dinner guests why their ham tastes better than anything they've ever bought at a store, while also admitting it's been hanging in your shed since 2019. The key to success lies in keeping everything dry after smoking. Moisture is the enemy of preserved meat, regardless of how well it's been treated. Even a small amount of dampness can create an opening for mold or bacteria to take hold. That's why storage location matters just as much as the preservation method itself. A damp basement will ruin smoked meat faster than you can say spoilage. But when done right, this technique produces meat that stays safe and delicious for years. Still, smoking isn't the only way to remove moisture from meat entirely. Some methods take the concept of dryness to an even more extreme level. The only product we'll ever promote on our channel is a book by Claude Davis, a veteran prepper, about 126 superfoods and preservation methods from crisis times like the Great Depression and wartime that are impossible to find elsewhere. We decided to promote his book because we are the last generation able to share these techniques and superfoods to our children or grandchildren. It would be a shame to see this information about highly nutritious foods and preservation methods to survive crises disappear. You can also find a book about herbal remedies from Nicole Apelian on their store. If you're watching this on TV, you can look up our channel, Frugal Solutions, on your phone or tablet and find the books by clicking the link in our channel description or any other video description. Removing almost every trace of water from meat creates something that can outlast most people's patience for eating the same thing repeatedly. The Amish cut meat into thin strips, salt them thoroughly, and then hang them to dry in shaded areas with excellent airflow. The strips can't touch each other, or they'll create damp spots where bacteria might grow. Spacing matters. Each piece needs air moving around all sides constantly. The drying process takes anywhere from several days to a couple of weeks, depending on humidity, temperature, and how thick the strips are. Direct sunlight would cook the meat rather than dry it, so shade is essential. The Amish often use mesh racks or string lines stretched across covered porches or inside barns where air flows freely but sun doesn't reach. As the meat dries, it shrinks dramatically. What started as a pound of fresh meat might end up weighing just 3 or 4 ounces when fully dried. Making jerky is one of the few times in life where watching your food shrivel up and turn into leather is considered a complete success. Properly dried jerky feels hard and breaks with a snap rather than bending. If it bends, there's still too much moisture left inside. That flexibility means bacteria could eventually find a way to grow. When it snaps cleanly, you know the water content has dropped low enough that nothing can survive in it. Most dried meat reaches a moisture level below 20%, and at that point, it becomes nearly indestructible from a preservation standpoint. The Amish store their jerky in airtight containers like glass jars or metal tins. Mason jars work perfectly because they seal out humidity while keeping the jerky visible so you can check on it without opening the container. Tins provide the same benefit with the added advantage of blocking light, which can degrade quality over very long periods. Some families have jerky that's been sitting in storage for 15 or 20 years, still perfectly safe to eat. Flavor concentration happens just like with salt-cured meat. Removing water leaves behind pure protein and whatever seasonings were used during preparation. The result is intensely meaty, chewy, and satisfying. A small piece of jerky provides substantial calories and protein, making it ideal for travel or emergencies. Hunters, travelers, and anyone working long days away from home have relied on dried meat for centuries because it's lightweight, compact, and needs no preparation before eating. The versatility of jerky extends beyond simple preservation. Different seasonings create entirely different flavors, while the preservation method stays the same. Some families add pepper and garlic for a savory kick. Others use honey or molasses for sweetness before drying. The sugar content needs to stay low, though, because too much sugar can prevent proper drying and actually encourage spoilage rather than prevent it. Jerky is proof that humans have been making food last longer through pure stubbornness since long before anyone invented expiration dates. The beauty of jerky is its simplicity. No special equipment is required, no complicated steps, just meat, salt, time, and moving air. Even today, when refrigeration is everywhere, many people still prefer homemade jerky over anything available in stores. The texture is better, the flavor is cleaner, and there are no mystery ingredients or preservatives beyond salt. Store-bought jerky often contains chemicals with names nobody can pronounce, while homemade versions contain exactly what you put into them and nothing more. Of course, sealing meat away from air entirely offers different advantages that drying alone can't match. Fat doesn't just make food taste better. It creates an airtight seal that preserves cooked meat for years without any other treatment needed. The Amish cook their meat thoroughly, pack it into crocks or jars, and then pour melted lard over the top until every piece is completely submerged. As the lard cools and solidifies, it forms a barrier that prevents air, bacteria, and moisture from reaching the meat below. This method works because bacteria need oxygen to survive and multiply. Cutting off their air supply stops them cold. The fat layer also prevents moisture from getting in or out, maintaining a stable environment inside the container. The meat underneath stays as fresh as the day it was sealed, sometimes for a decade or more. When you're ready to use it, you simply scrape away the hardened fat on top, remove what you need, and seal it back up again with fresh melted lard. The Amish discovered that meat preserved in lard stays fresh for years, which is impressive until you realize they also have to resist the temptation to just eat all that delicious lard by itself. Temperature during storage matters, but not as much as you might expect. A cool cellar or pantry works fine. The fat doesn't need to stay frozen, just solid enough to maintain its seal. In warmer months, the lard might soften slightly, but as long as it still covers the meat completely, protection remains intact. This makes the method remarkably forgiving compared to techniques that require precise temperature control. Pork stores beautifully this way because pork fat and pork meat naturally complement each other. Sausages, ground pork, and even whole cuts pack well into crocks. The meat stays moist and flavorful under its fat blanket, avoiding the dryness that comes with other preservation methods. When cooked after years of storage, it tastes surprisingly fresh, not old or stale. The fat actually helps maintain the meat's texture and prevents it from becoming tough or stringy. The rendering process itself deserves attention because quality lard makes all the difference. The Amish render their own fat from butchering, heating it slowly until the fat melts and separates from any connective tissue or meat particles. The liquid fat gets strained through cheesecloth to remove impurities, resulting in pure, clean lard that stores well and provides the best seal. Commercial lard works too, but home-rendered versions often have better flavor and fewer additives. Fat-sealed meat is basically the original version of vacuum packing, except instead of plastic and a machine, you just need a pig and some patience. The size of your storage container depends on how much meat you want to preserve at once. Small jars work for portions you'll use quickly. Large crocks hold enough meat to feed a family through an entire winter. The Amish often use stoneware crocks because they maintain consistent temperature better than metal or glass, and they're less likely to crack from temperature changes. One major advantage of this method is that it works for already cooked meat. You can prepare dishes like stew meat, shredded pork, or meatballs, then preserve them ready to eat. This saves time later since you're not starting from scratch with raw ingredients. Just heat and serve. The convenience factor made this technique popular long before anyone coined the term meal prep. But for those who want the absolute longest shelf life possible, there's a preservation method that involves heat, pressure, and glass jars working together in ways that lock freshness in so completely that meat can sit on a shelf for 2 decades. Sealing meat inside glass jars using heat creates a preservation method so effective that food scientists still consider it one of the safest long-term storage techniques ever developed. The Amish place raw or cooked meat into sterilized jars, leaving about an inch of space at the top. Then they either submerge the jars in boiling water or use a pressure canner to heat everything to temperatures high enough to kill every possible organism that could cause spoilage. Boiling water works for high-acid foods, but meat requires pressure canning because it's low in acid. Bacteria spores, particularly those that cause botulism, can survive boiling water temperatures. Pressure canning raises the temperature inside the jars to around 240 degrees, hot enough to destroy even the most resilient spores. The process takes time, usually 75 to 90 minutes, depending on jar size and meat type, but that time investment buys years of safe storage. As the jars cool after processing, something remarkable happens. The contents contract slightly, creating a vacuum that sucks the lid down tight against the jar rim. You can actually hear the lids pop as they seal, a satisfying ping that tells you the preservation worked. That vacuum seal keeps air out permanently. Without air, bacteria can't grow. Without bacteria, the meat stays safe indefinitely as long as the seal remains intact. The science behind pressure canning is straightforward but precise. Water boils at 212 degrees at sea level, but bacteria spores need higher temperatures to die. Pressure canners increase the pressure inside the vessel, which raises the boiling point of water. At 10 pounds of pressure, water boils at 240 degrees, hot enough to kill everything. The Amish monitor their pressure gauges carefully, making small adjustments to maintain the correct pressure throughout the entire processing time. Pressure canning is probably the only situation where putting meat in jars and hearing popping sounds means everything went exactly according to plan. The Amish often label their jars with the year and contents using simple tags, or written directly on the lid. This helps track age, though properly canned meat routinely lasts 15 to 20 years or more. The nutritional value stays remarkably stable too. Protein doesn't degrade in sealed jars. Vitamins might decrease slightly over many years, but the meat remains a solid source of calories and nutrients even decades after canning. Storage conditions affect longevity, though not as dramatically as with other preservation methods. Cool and dark is ideal. Heat and light can gradually degrade quality over very long periods, though the meat stays safe to eat. A basement shelf or pantry away from windows works perfectly. Some families have jars that have been sitting undisturbed for 10 years or more, waiting for the moment they're needed. Opening a jar of home-canned meat years after it was sealed reveals something surprising. The texture and flavor remain incredibly close to freshly cooked meat. There's no freezer burn, no drying out, no off flavors from oxidation. The meat tastes clean and fresh because it's been protected from every factor that normally causes deterioration. Beef stays tender, chicken remains moist, and stew meat keeps its rich flavor completely intact. The variety of foods you can preserve through canning extends far beyond plain meat. The Amish can complete meals, soups, stews, and meat mixed with vegetables or grains. Having ready-made meals in jars means dinner can be on the table in minutes, even during busy harvest seasons or when unexpected guests arrive. The convenience rivals anything modern frozen dinners offer, except the canned versions last decades instead of months and require no electricity to store. The real miracle of canned meat is convincing your dinner guests that the chicken they're enjoying was actually sealed in a jar before their kids were born. The initial investment in canning equipment pays for itself quickly when you consider how much meat a family can preserve. A pressure canner costs less than a month of electricity for running a freezer, and it lasts for decades with proper care. Glass jars get reused year after year. Only the lids need replacing, and even those are inexpensive. The self-sufficiency that comes from rows of canned meat lining your shelves is hard to put a price on. Yet for all the science behind pressure canning, there's something to be said for older methods that rely on nothing but salt, water, and time to keep meat edible for years. Salt water has preserved more meat throughout history than any refrigerator ever will. The Amish submerge their meat in strong brine solutions, essentially creating an environment where bacteria simply cannot function. The salt concentration in these brines typically ranges between 20 to 25%, far higher than what most microorganisms can tolerate. At that level, the salt pulls moisture out of bacterial cells through osmosis, effectively dehydrating them before they can cause any harm to the meat. The process starts with mixing salt into water until no more will dissolve. Some families add sugar, pepper, cloves, or other spices to enhance flavor while the meat cures. The spices aren't just for taste either. Many of them have antimicrobial properties that provide an extra layer of protection. Cloves, for instance, contain compounds that inhibit bacterial growth, making them a practical addition beyond their aromatic qualities. Meat goes into wooden barrels or stone crocks filled with this brine, then gets weighted down to ensure every piece stays fully submerged. Exposure to air means exposure to oxygen, and oxygen means potential spoilage. The weight keeps everything under the liquid surface where it belongs. These containers aren't just storage vessels. Wood and stone both help maintain stable temperatures and don't react with the salt the way metal might. The choice of container material matters more than most people realize. Metal containers, especially iron or aluminum, can react with salt brine over time, creating off flavors and potentially harmful compounds. Wood has natural antimicrobial properties and doesn't react with salt. Stone crocks stay completely inert and provide excellent temperature stability. Both materials have been used for centuries with proven success. Brining meat is essentially giving bacteria a salt bath they never asked for and definitely won't survive. The brine needs checking and refreshing about once a year. Over time, the salt concentration can decrease as it's absorbed into the meat, or water can evaporate from the top layer. Adding fresh brine or more salt keeps the preservation going strong. Some barrels have been in continuous use for decades, with families simply adding new meat and refreshing the solution as needed. The oldest documented brine meat that remained edible was stored for over 30 years. Temperature affects brine storage less than you might expect. The high salt content provides remarkable stability even in less than ideal conditions. A cool cellar works best somewhere around 50 to 60 degrees, but even slightly warmer spaces can work as long as the brine stays strong. The salt does the heavy lifting when it comes to preservation. When it's time to use brined meat, it gets pulled from the barrel, rinsed thoroughly, and often soaked in fresh water for several hours to remove excess salt. Even after soaking, the meat retains a pleasant saltiness that enhances its flavor. The texture changes during brining too, becoming firmer and denser as the salt alters the protein structure. Many people prefer the texture of brined meat to fresh because it holds up better during cooking and doesn't dry out as easily. The Amish have been keeping meat in saltwater barrels for centuries, which makes you wonder if they knew something about pickling long before it became a trendy food blog topic. The beauty of brining lies in its simplicity and flexibility. You can brine almost any type of meat, from pork to beef to poultry. The method scales up or down depending on your needs. A small crock can preserve enough meat for a couple of months, while a large barrel can hold a year's worth or more. The equipment costs almost nothing, and the ingredients are just salt, water, and whatever spices you choose to include. Yet despite how straightforward brining is, some preservation methods take the concept of cold storage to levels that don't require any salt at all. Nature provides its own refrigeration if you know where to look and how to use it. The Amish dig root cellars deep into the ground, often 8 to 12 feet down, where temperatures stay consistently cool year-round regardless of what's happening on the surface. Even in the heat of summer, these underground spaces maintain temperatures between 45 to 55 degrees. In winter, they drop even lower, sometimes reaching near freezing levels without any mechanical assistance whatsoever. The science behind this is straightforward. Soil acts as an insulator, protecting the space below from temperature swings above ground. The deeper you go, the more stable the temperature becomes. At depths of 10 feet or more, the Earth maintains what's called a thermal constant, a temperature that barely fluctuates throughout the year. This natural phenomenon has been understood and exploited for thousands of years across countless cultures, but the Amish have refined it to an art form. But root cellars are just the beginning. Ice houses take cold storage to another level entirely. In winter, when ponds and lakes freeze solid, the Amish cut large blocks of ice, sometimes weighing 50 to 100 pounds each. These blocks get stacked in specially designed buildings with thick walls and heavy insulation. The ice goes in layers, with sawdust packed tightly between and around each block. Sawdust is an exceptional insulator, trapping air in its tiny spaces and preventing heat transfer. The amount of ice a family can store depends on the size of their ice house and how cold their winters get. A well-insulated ice house filled in January can keep ice frozen well into August or even September. Some families report having usable ice lasting until the next winter, essentially going a full year on one harvest. The key is minimizing warm air exposure. Every time the door opens, precious cold escapes and warm air rushes in, starting the melting process. That's why the Amish organize their ice houses carefully, placing frequently needed items near the door and long-term storage deeper inside. Meat wrapped in burlap or straw gets buried in or near the ice blocks. The wrapping prevents direct contact, which would cause freezer burn while still allowing the cold to penetrate through. The meat stays frozen solid for months, completely preserved without any salt, smoke, or canning required. This method keeps meat closer to its fresh state than any other traditional preservation technique. When thawed and cooked, it tastes exactly like fresh meat because nothing about it has changed chemically. It was simply kept cold enough that decomposition never started. Ice houses prove that you can have frozen food storage without electricity, though explaining to your neighbors why you're harvesting a pond in January might still require some effort. The physical labor involved in ice harvesting is substantial. Cutting through ice a foot thick or more requires saws, hard work, and usually several people working together. Hauling 100-pound blocks from a pond to an ice house isn't a job for one person, but the effort pays off with months of reliable cold storage that costs nothing to run. No electric bills, no maintenance beyond keeping the insulation intact, and no worries about power outages ruining an entire freezer full of food. Modern studies on traditional ice houses show they can maintain temperatures below freezing for 6 to 8 months when properly constructed and managed. The insulation value of packed sawdust is comparable to some modern insulating materials, which explains why the technique works so effectively for so long. Before electric refrigeration became common in the 1930s and 1940s, ice houses were standard features in rural communities across America. The irony of ice houses is that they require the most work during the coldest part of winter, which is exactly when most people prefer to stay indoors wrapped in blankets. Root cellars and ice houses represent preservation through environmental control rather than chemical treatment. The meat stays fundamentally unchanged, just kept cold enough that decomposition can't begin. This makes the meat from cold storage the most versatile for cooking since it hasn't been altered by salt, smoke, or any other preservative. You can use it in any recipe that calls for fresh meat with identical results. Still, keeping meat cold requires either digging deep or harvesting ice, and not every preservation method needs such physical infrastructure. Sausages represent one of the most efficient ways to preserve meat because their shape and size allow smoke and salt to penetrate completely and evenly. The Amish grind their meat, mix it with salt and spices, and stuff it into casings before the smoking process begins. The casings, traditionally made from cleaned intestines, create a protective barrier that helps hold everything together while allowing smoke to permeate through. Modern synthetic casings work too, though many families stick with natural ones because they're available, biodegradable, and have been used successfully for centuries. The spice blend matters more than most people realize. Beyond adding flavor, spices like black pepper, garlic, and mustard seed have antimicrobial properties that help inhibit bacterial growth. Pepper in particular contains piperine, a compound that disrupts bacterial cell membranes. The concentration doesn't need to be high to be effective. Even small amounts provide meaningful protection when combined with salt and smoke. Smoking sausages take several days at minimum, sometimes stretching to a week or more for larger batches. The sausages hang in the smokehouse at temperatures between 70 to 90 degrees, absorbing smoke slowly and continuously. The goal isn't to cook them, but to cure them. The smoke dries out the exterior, forming a hard skin that seals the meat inside. This skin becomes the first line of defense against insects, mold, and moisture. After smoking, the sausages move to their long-term storage location, usually an attic or a dedicated area in the smokehouse itself. Height matters for storage because warm air rises, carrying moisture with it. The highest parts of a building tend to be driest, which is exactly what preserved sausages need. Attics work particularly well because they have good airflow from vents and stay warm enough that condensation never forms. The combination of dry air and constant ventilation keeps the sausages stable for years. The skin on a properly smoked sausage becomes remarkably hard, almost like leather. This hardness protects the meat inside from exposure to air and pests. Insects can't bite through it, and the lack of moisture on the surface means mold can't establish itself. Inside that hard shell, the meat stays preserved and safe, ready to be sliced and eaten whenever needed. Some families have sausages hanging in their attics that are 3, 4, or even 5 years old, still perfectly edible. Eating aged smoked sausage is different from eating fresh or even recently smoked varieties. The texture is dense and chewy, the flavor is concentrated and intense, and a little goes a long way in terms of satisfying hunger. Thin slices work best because the meat is so rich. Many Amish families serve aged sausage alongside bread and cheese, letting each component balance the others. The combination creates a complete meal that's both filling and flavorful. The process of hanging sausages isn't complicated, but it requires attention to detail. Each sausage needs space around it for air circulation. Touching sausages create damp spots where problems can develop. They hang from hooks or string, spaced far enough apart that even on humid days, air can move freely around every surface. Checking them periodically for any signs of moisture or mold is important, though problems are rare when the initial smoking was done properly. Hanging sausages in the attic makes perfect sense until you have to explain to visitors why there's cured meat dangling from your ceiling rafters like some kind of delicious chandelier. The weight of sausages decreases dramatically during smoking and storage as moisture continues to evaporate over time. A sausage that weighed a pound when freshly made might only weigh 6 or 7 ounces after a year of hanging. That weight loss is almost entirely water, which means what remains is concentrated protein and fat. The nutritional density per ounce actually increases as the sausage ages, making it an incredibly efficient survival food. You need less to feel satisfied, and what you eat delivers more nutrients per bite. Winter was traditionally the best time for making smoked sausages because cooler temperatures made the initial smoking process easier to control and reduced the risk of spoilage during preparation. Many families still follow this seasonal pattern, preparing their year's supply of sausages in late fall or early winter. By the time warm weather arrives, the sausages are fully cured and hanging safely in their storage location. Yet even with all the reliability of smoked sausages, there are sealing methods that take preservation beyond smoke and salt alone. Coating meat in beeswax creates a seal so complete that even decades later, the meat inside remains as preserved as the day it was wrapped. The Amish melt beeswax in large pots, then dip cooked or dried meat pieces into the liquid wax repeatedly until a thick coating builds up. Each dip adds another layer, and after several applications, the coating becomes substantial enough to block all air and moisture. The wax hardens as it cools, forming a shell that nothing can penetrate. Beeswax works because it's completely waterproof and airtight. Unlike plastic wrap or other modern materials, beeswax doesn't degrade over time. It stays stable for decades without breaking down or developing weak spots. The seal remains intact year after year, protecting the meat inside from every environmental factor that normally causes deterioration. Air can't get in, moisture can't get in, and insects can't bite through the hardened wax. The technique works with various types of meat, though dried or cooked meat responds better than raw. The surface needs to be dry before wax application because any moisture will get trapped inside and potentially cause problems. Dry jerky or fully cooked pieces are ideal candidates. The wax coating adds negligible weight and bulk while providing maximum protection. The temperature of the melted wax matters when applying it. Too hot, and it can actually start cooking the meat surface. Too cool, and it won't flow smoothly or adhere properly. The Amish keep their wax at around 150 to 160 degrees, warm enough to stay liquid and coat evenly, but not so hot that it damages the meat. Each dip needs time to cool and harden before the next application, building up layers gradually rather than trying to create a thick coating all at once. Covering meat in beeswax is like giving it a suit of armor, except the armor is edible and smells faintly of honey. Fat layers work similarly to beeswax, but use rendered animal fat instead. After coating the meat in melted fat, it gets placed in jars or wrapped in cloth and stored in a cool location. The fat solidifies and creates the same kind of airtight seal that wax does. Some families prefer this method because fat is a byproduct of butchering and costs nothing, whereas beeswax requires either keeping bees or buying wax from someone who does. The choice between wax and fat often comes down to personal preference and available resources. Both methods work equally well for preservation. Wax has the advantage of staying solid at higher temperatures, making it more reliable if storage conditions aren't ideal. Fat can soften in warm weather, though as long as it stays in place and continues covering the meat completely, the seal remains effective. Storage in sealed jars after wax or fat treatment adds another layer of protection. The jar keeps dust and debris away, while the wax or fat seal handles the real preservation work. Glass jars are traditional, though any container that keeps the sealed meat safe works fine. Cool cellars are the preferred storage location, where temperatures stay low enough that even fat seals remain solid year-round. Opening wax-sealed meat years after storage reveals something remarkable. The meat inside looks and smells almost exactly as it did when first sealed. There's no oxidation, no rancidity, no signs of age whatsoever. The preservation is so complete that it's easy to forget how long the meat has been stored. This makes wax and fat sealing particularly valuable for emergency supplies, where you want food that will last indefinitely and remain ready to use at a moment's notice. The only challenge with beeswax sealed meat is remembering not to bite into it before removing the wax coating, though that mistake only happens once. Historical records show this preservation method being used across many cultures, not just among the Amish. Medieval Europeans sealed cheese and meat in wax for long voyages. Ancient civilizations used animal fats to preserve food in sealed containers. The technique is as old as agriculture itself, refined over thousands of years into the reliable system used today. The simplicity of the method, combined with its effectiveness, explains why it has persisted despite the availability of modern alternatives. When you can preserve meat for 15 to 20 years using nothing but wax or fat, there's little reason to look for more complicated solutions. Though for those who want their preserved meat to serve double duty as portable survival food, there's one more method that combines preservation with convenience. Combining dried meat with melted fat and grains creates a food so stable and nutritionally complete that it can sustain someone for months with no other food sources needed. The Amish grind their dried meat into a fine powder, then mix it with rendered fat in roughly equal proportions. Some add crushed grains, dried berries, or nuts to round out the nutrition and add variety to the flavor. The mixture gets shaped into blocks or balls, then stored in sealed containers where it can last for decades. The concept behind pemmican is beautiful in its simplicity. Protein from the meat provides the building blocks for muscle maintenance and repair. Fat delivers concentrated calories and helps the body absorb fat-soluble vitamins. Grains or berries add carbohydrates for quick energy and fiber for digestive health. Together, these components create a balanced food that contains everything a person needs to survive. Early explorers and hunters relied on pemmican for journeys lasting months because they knew a small amount could sustain them through harsh conditions. The grinding process is crucial. The meat needs to be reduced to an almost powder-like consistency for the fat to bind it properly. Too coarse and the mixture won't hold together well. Too fine and it becomes paste-like and difficult to work with. The right texture feels like coarse flour, grainy but not chunky. Traditional methods used stone mortars and pestles for grinding, though any tool that can crush dried meat into small pieces works fine. Fat ratios matter more than most people realize. Too little fat and the pemmican crumbles apart. Too much and it becomes greasy and unpleasant to eat. The sweet spot sits around 50 to 60% fat by weight, though exact proportions can vary based on personal preference and intended use. Higher fat content provides more calories per pound, which matters when weight is a concern for travelers or hunters. Shaping the mixture happens while the fat is still warm and pliable. The Amish form it into blocks that fit conveniently in pouches or bags, or roll it into balls about the size of a golf ball. These shapes make portion control easy and allow for quick consumption without preparation. A single block or ball can provide enough calories and nutrition for several hours of hard physical work. Storage containers need to block air and light to maximize shelf life. Tin boxes work excellently because they're airtight and completely opaque. Glass jars function well too, though they should be kept in dark locations since light can gradually degrade fat quality over very long periods. The pemmican itself doesn't spoil in the traditional sense. With no moisture content and high fat content, nothing can grow on it or in it. The shelf life of properly made pemmican exceeds 20 years easily. Some documented samples have remained edible for 50 years or more, though flavor quality does gradually decline over such extended periods. For practical purposes, pemmican made today will still be perfectly safe and nutritious 2 decades from now. This makes it one of the longest-lasting preserved foods in existence, surpassed only by honey and salt in terms of pure longevity. Different variations of pemmican exist depending on regional preferences and available ingredients. Some versions include dried fruits like cranberries or blueberries, which add natural sugars and antioxidants. Others incorporate ground nuts for additional protein and healthy fats. The Amish adapt their recipes based on what's available from their own harvest and livestock, making each family's pemmican slightly different while following the same basic principles. Pemmican is essentially the original protein bar, except it actually tastes like real food and doesn't require a nutrition label longer than the ingredient list. Eating pemmican takes some getting used to for people accustomed to modern processed foods. The texture is dense and fatty, the flavor is rich and intense, and a little goes a surprisingly long way. Most people find it quite satisfying once they adjust to it, especially when hungry from physical exertion. The high-fat content provides a feeling of fullness that lasts much longer than carbohydrate-heavy foods. Your body processes the fat slowly, releasing energy steadily over hours rather than the quick spike and crash that comes from sugar or refined carbohydrates. Modern survival experts have rediscovered pemmican in recent years, recognizing its value as emergency food storage. The combination of extreme shelf stability, complete nutrition, and portability makes it ideal for disaster preparedness. You can store pemmican and forget about it for years, confident that it will be ready whenever needed. No rotation required, no expiration dates to track, just food that stays good until you're ready to use it. The Amish have known this for generations, quietly maintaining traditions that modern society is only now beginning to appreciate again. The practicality of pemmican extends beyond emergencies. For anyone working outdoors in cold weather, pemmican provides exactly the kind of dense, fatty calories your body needs to maintain warmth and energy. Farmers working long days in the fields, loggers spending weeks in remote areas, and anyone engaged in hard physical labor can rely on pemmican to keep them going when proper meals aren't convenient. The fact that it requires no preparation, no cooking, and no refrigeration makes it the ultimate convenience food, though it predates that term by centuries. While you're fumbling with settings on your fancy electric stove, The Amish are creating mouth-watering beef dishes using methods that haven't changed in centuries. No electricity, no gas lines, just pure ingenuity and incredible results. Their ancient techniques don't just survive without modern conveniences, they thrive because of it. In the quiet corners of America where power lines don't stretch and gas pipelines don't run, the Amish have perfected cooking methods that many of us have forgotten. At the heart of their kitchen arsenal sits the humble cast iron pan, an ancient technology that outperforms many modern cooking gadgets. Cast iron cookware isn't just equipment for the Amish, it's a family heirloom with stories seasoned into its surface. These heavy black pans often journey through generations, with some pieces proudly serving families for over a century. Imagine cooking on the same pan your great-grandmother used to feed her children. That's not just cooking, that's connecting with history through flavor. What makes these pans so special? For starters, cast iron has incredible heat retention. While modern pans heat quickly and cool just as fast, cast iron builds heat slowly and releases it gradually. This creates an even cooking surface that forgives small mistakes. Leave your modern pan on high heat too long, and you'll burn dinner. A cast iron pan, however, distributes that intense heat across its entire surface, giving you time to adjust. The Amish have mastered cooking with fire, and cast iron is their perfect partner. When placed over an open flame or nestled among hot coals, these pans transform from simple cooking vessels to sophisticated temperature control devices. The thick iron bottom absorbs heat from uneven flames, releasing it steadily to whatever food is cooking inside. It's nature's temperature regulator. An Amish breakfast might feed a dozen people, all cooked in a single cast iron skillet over glowing coals. Despite the rustic cooking setup, the food comes out perfectly cooked. Eggs evenly done, pancakes golden brown. You might spend thousands on a modern stove and still not match those results. That's the real magic of cast iron. An Amish farmer once quipped that his cast iron skillet was so well seasoned, eggs would slide around so much he had to chase them with a fork just to eat breakfast. The skillet denied all allegations of being too slippery. Dutch ovens take this magic even further. These heavy pots with tight-fitting lids create miniature ovens that can be placed directly in coals. The Amish use these versatile pots for everything from baking bread to slow-cooking tough cuts of beef until they fall apart. By placing coals both underneath and on top of the lid, they effectively create a 360-degree heat environment. Perhaps the most interesting aspect of Amish cast iron cooking is how they season their pans. Unlike modern non-stick coatings that wear off and release chemicals, cast iron develops a natural non-stick surface through a process called seasoning. Every time they cook with fat or oil, a microscopic layer bonds to the pan's surface. Over years, these layers build up, creating a naturally slick cooking surface that only improves with age. Many Amish families have outdoor cooking areas specifically designed for cast iron cooking. These often feature adjustable hooks for hanging pots at different heights above the fire. By raising or lowering the pot, they can fine-tune the cooking temperature without adjusting the fire itself. It's simple physics replacing electronic controls. The thermal mass of cast iron, its ability to hold and distribute heat, means these pots maintain surprisingly consistent temperatures despite the natural fluctuations of wood fires. While the flames might dance up and down, the temperature inside a well-heated Dutch oven barely budges. This stability is crucial when cooking dishes that need precise temperature control. For the Amish, this isn't trendy off-grid cooking. It's simply cooking. These methods have sustained their communities for generations, quietly demonstrating that good food doesn't require modern technology. Their cast iron pans sit at the intersection of simplicity and sophistication, proving that sometimes older technology is better technology. As efficient as cast iron cooking is, sometimes you need to cook meat without constantly tending a fire. That's when the Amish turn to another ingenious method, spit roasting. By carefully positioning meat at the perfect distance from flames and establishing precise rotation schedules, they can transform tough cuts into succulent feasts without modern conveniences. Meat turning slowly over an open flame is one of humanity's oldest cooking methods. The Amish have kept this ancient tradition alive, perfecting techniques that many modern cooks have abandoned. While we might think of spit roasting as simply sticking meat on a stick over fire, the Amish approach reveals surprising complexity and wisdom. The setup begins with the spit stand. Unlike what you might expect, Amish spit stands aren't made from metal, but from green wood, freshly cut branches that still contain moisture. This isn't because they lack access to metal, it's because green wood won't catch fire during the long cooking process. The natural moisture in the wood acts as a built-in fire protection system. Smart, right? Distance matters enormously in spit roasting. Too close to the flames, and your dinner becomes a torch. Too far, and you'll wait until next Tuesday for your meal to cook. The Amish have found that 18 to 24 inches from the flames creates the perfect cooking zone. This distance allows heat to penetrate the meat slowly without burning the surface. It's a measurement refined through generations of trial and error. What happens to all those delicious juices that drip from the meat as it cooks? In modern grilling, they often sizzle away into the coals, creating smoke but losing flavor. The Amish place drip pans beneath the rotating meat to capture every precious drop. These juices become the foundation for rich gravies or are used to baste the meat itself, creating a cyclical flavor enhancement system that wastes nothing. The rotation schedule might seem like a small detail, but it makes all the difference. The only product we'll ever promote on our channel is a book by Claude Davis, a veteran prepper, about 126 superfoods and preservation methods from crisis times like the Great Depression and wartime that are impossible to find elsewhere. We decided to promote his book because we are the last generation able to share these techniques and superfoods to our children or grandchildren. It would be a shame to see this information about highly nutritious foods and preservation methods to survive crises disappear. You can also find a book about herbal remedies from Nicole Apelian on their store. If you're watching this on TV, you can look up our channel, Frugal Solutions, on your phone or tablet and find the books by clicking the link in our channel description or any other video description. Modern rotisserie units turn constantly, but the Amish approach is different. They've learned that turning the meat every 8 to 10 minutes creates the perfect balance. This timing allows the side facing the fire to develop flavor without drying out, while the resting side has time to redistribute juices. It's a rhythm that creates perfectly cooked meat, crisp on the outside, juicy within. Heat management in spit roasting doesn't involve turning knobs or pressing buttons. Instead, the Amish rake coals toward or away from the cooking meat. Rather than adjusting the food's position, they reshape the heat source itself. This approach provides remarkable control over cooking temperatures using nothing but a simple rake and understanding of fire behavior. The wood selection process shows just how sophisticated this simple cooking method really is. Hardwoods like oak and maple form the cooking foundation, creating steady, long-lasting heat. But the Amish don't stop there. Fruitwoods like apple and cherry are added during different stages of cooking to impart subtle flavor notes to the meat. It's like a time-release flavor system built entirely from different tree species. The spit itself deserves attention too. While modern rotisseries use electric motors, the Amish rely on manpower, often the younger members of the family. Taking turns at the spit becomes both a cooking necessity and a communal activity. Jokes are told, stories are shared, and cooking knowledge passes naturally between generations as they work together. An Amish elder once joked that spit-turning duty is the only chore where youngsters voluntarily work up a sweat. Apparently, roasting meat impresses potential partners better than any fancy English gadget. Cooking a large cut of beef this way isn't quick. A substantial roast might take 4 to 6 hours over an open flame. This slow cooking process breaks down tough connective tissues in less expensive cuts, transforming them into tender, flavorful meals. What modern cooks might consider a burden, the time investment, actually becomes an advantage in extracting maximum flavor and tenderness. Weather considerations add another layer of knowledge. Wind direction isn't just a passing concern, but a fundamental aspect of the cooking setup. Fire pits are positioned to account for prevailing winds, or temporary wind breaks are constructed from simple materials. This environmental awareness demonstrates how deeply the Amish understand the integration of cooking with natural forces. The resulting meat develops flavors impossible to replicate with modern methods. The slow rotation, the wood smoke, the careful basting with collected drippings all combine to create something beyond ordinary roasted beef. The outer layer develops a rich, aromatic crust, while the interior remains remarkably moist. When the last dinner plate is cleared away, the remaining embers don't go to waste. They're perfect for boiling large kettles of water, the foundation of another Amish cooking technique altogether. These massive iron pots, sometimes holding up to 40 gallons, transform humble ingredients into meals that can feed an entire extended family. Have you ever tried to feed 20 people at once? Most of us reach for the phone to order takeout. The Amish reach for their kettles. These aren't your typical kitchen pots. Amish cooking kettles are massive cast iron vessels, some holding up to 40 gallons of liquid. That's enough to make about 160 bowls of stew in a single batch. Your largest pot probably looks like a thimble in comparison. The size alone isn't what makes these kettles special. It's their design. Unlike regular pots, cooking kettles have extra thick bottoms that prevent scorching. When you're cooking over an unpredictable open flame for hours on end, this thickness becomes crucial. Without it, the bottom layer would burn while the top remained raw, a cooking disaster no amount of seasoning could fix. These kettles don't sit directly on flames. Instead, they hang suspended above the fire on adjustable pot hooks or sturdy tripods. This hanging system might seem primitive, but it offers remarkable temperature control. Need less heat? Raise the kettle a few inches. Need more? Lower it closer to the flames. It's a simple physics solution that works better than you might expect. The Amish use this cooking method particularly for tough cuts of beef, the parts most modern cooks avoid. While we might toss these cheaper cuts aside or grind them up, the Amish transform them into tender, flavorful meals through the magic of slow kettle cooking. The extended cooking time, often 4 to 6 hours, breaks down tough connective tissues in the meat. Cuts that would normally fight back against your teeth become fork-tender masterpieces. What goes into these kettles besides beef? The vegetable selection might surprise city folks. Beyond the usual carrots and potatoes, Amish kettles often contain turnips, parsnips, and other root vegetables many Americans wouldn't recognize if they tripped over them in a garden. An Amish cook once quipped that their stew vegetables are so old-fashioned they're practically wearing bonnets and suspenders themselves. These forgotten vegetables add complex flavors and textures that enrich the broth. Wood selection for the cooking fire isn't random either. Different wood types create different heat profiles. Hardwoods like oak and maple burn slowly and steadily, providing the controlled heat needed for long cooking sessions. A kettle might simmer over the same fire for half a day without requiring constant attention, perfect for a community that values efficiency. The cooking process itself becomes a community event. While modern cooking often happens in isolation, one person in the kitchen while others wait elsewhere, kettle cooking naturally draws people together. The size of the operation requires multiple hands, creating an opportunity for sharing stories and skills across generations. These kettles aren't just cooking tools, they're economic multipliers. A single kettle can stretch relatively small amounts of meat to feed extended families. During difficult economic times, this efficiency becomes even more valuable. A few pounds of tough beef, supplemented with garden vegetables and grains, transforms into a nourishing meal for dozens of people. The aromas from kettle cooking spread far beyond the kitchen. The slow simmering process releases waves of savory scents that announce dinner is coming hours before the meal is served. It's nature's dinner bell, calling family members in from distant fields better than any shout could manage. Temperature control without thermometers requires developing specific skills. Experienced Amish cooks can tell the kettle's temperature by watching how the liquid moves. A gentle simmer with occasional bubbles breaking the surface means the temperature is perfect. It's cooking by observation rather than measurement, a skill that takes years to develop, but once mastered, works in any condition. Cleanup might seem daunting for such large cooking vessels, but the Amish have systems for this too. Kettles are often cleaned using sand and water, no soap needed. The sand acts as a natural abrasive that removes food particles without damaging the seasoned surface. Then the kettle is immediately dried and lightly oiled to prevent rust. This maintenance routine explains why some kettles remain in service for generations. When dinner's finished and the massive kettle is finally empty, thoughts turn to tomorrow's meals. Perhaps the weather will change, calling for a different cooking approach. Maybe it's time to light the campfire and arrange the rocks just so, creating the perfect setup for boiling smaller portions directly over the flames. A more direct cooking method for days when time is short and hunger won't wait. The campfire might seem like the most basic cooking method, but in Amish hands, it becomes surprisingly sophisticated. Unlike weekend campers who toss random sticks onto flames, the Amish approach fire building as a precise science. Let's start with the wood. Did you know that different trees create completely different fires? The Amish certainly do. They select maple when they need steady, reliable heat for long cooking stews. When higher temperatures are required, hickory becomes the fuel of choice. Its dense wood creates intense heat that can quickly bring even large pots to a rolling boil. It's like having different settings on a stove, except the settings grow on trees. Most people build fires wherever it seems convenient. The Amish carefully consider wind direction first. A poorly positioned fire might send smoke directly into the cook's face, or worse, create uneven heating as gusts blow flames away from the cooking pot. By building fires with the prevailing wind in mind, they ensure consistent heat and a more pleasant cooking experience. Nobody enjoys cooking while coughing through a cloud of smoke. Next comes a feature most casual campers never consider: reflector rocks. Large stones are strategically placed around the fire to bounce heat back toward the cooking pot. This simple addition can increase efficiency by up to 30%, meaning less wood needed and faster cooking times. Nature's own heat boosters, these rocks also help shield the flames from sudden wind shifts. The Amish often employ what's known as a 3-stone fire setup. 3 similarly sized rocks are arranged around the fire, creating a stable platform for pots while allowing air to feed the flames from below. The beauty of this arrangement is that you can adjust the height of the cooking pot by simply moving the stones closer together or farther apart. It's like having adjustable burners without any moving parts. When it comes to the beef itself, uniform cutting becomes crucial. Pieces are carefully trimmed to similar sizes, typically 1 to 2 inch cubes. This consistency ensures that all pieces cook at the same rate. Modern cooks with precise temperature controls might get away with irregular cuts, but when cooking over open flames, such attention to detail makes the difference between perfectly tender beef and a disappointing mix of overcooked and undercooked pieces. The cooking process often involves a clever separation technique. Once the beef reaches the proper tenderness, it's removed from the pot while vegetables continue cooking in the enriched broth. This prevents the meat from becoming mushy while allowing the vegetables to absorb the savory flavors left behind. It's a 2-stage cooking method that maximizes the quality of both components. Water management shows another level of expertise. Rather than filling pots to the brim, the Amish typically fill them about 2/3 full. This prevents boiling over while allowing enough room for the natural movement that distributes heat through the liquid. You might call it the Goldilocks principle of campfire cooking. Not too full, not too empty, but just right. The fire itself isn't left to burn freely. Careful tending maintains optimal cooking conditions. Small sticks are added regularly to keep flames consistent, while larger logs are positioned to burn gradually, providing sustained heat. This constant attention might seem labor-intensive to modern cooks accustomed to setting timers, but it creates a connection between cook and food that automated methods can't match. Cooking times aren't measured by clocks, but by observations. The experienced eye watches for specific bubbling patterns, the way steam rises, how the beef changes color and texture. An Amish grandmother once joked that she's been cooking so long she can tell when dinner's ready just by listening to the pot whisper. These visual cues provide more accurate guidance than any timer could when working with variable heat sources. One particularly clever technique involves using the pot lid as a temperature gauge. By watching how water droplets behave when sprinkled on the lid, the cook can determine approximate temperatures. Droplets that sizzle and evaporate instantly indicate high heat, while droplets that dance and skitter across the surface suggest moderate temperatures. Perfect for most beef recipes. As night falls and temperatures drop, the campfire setup proves its value beyond cooking. The same stones that reflected heat toward the pot now radiate stored warmth back to the people gathering around. Cooking vessels might be put aside, but the knowledge that created a perfect meal now creates comfort in another form. And as conversation turns to tomorrow's work, someone might mention the Haybox waiting in the storage room, a completely different way to cook that uses no ongoing fire at all. What if you could start cooking dinner, walk away for 8 hours, and come back to a perfectly cooked meal without using any electricity, gas, or ongoing fire? This isn't a pitch for some new kitchen gadget. It's an ancient Amish cooking method that might just be the most energy-efficient way to cook ever invented. Haybox cooking sounds exactly like what it is, cooking food in a box filled with hay. But the simplicity of the name hides the brilliance of the concept. At its core, Haybox cooking is thermal retention cooking, a way to use stored heat rather than constant heat to slowly cook food to perfection. The process begins normally enough. A pot of food, perhaps a tough beef roast with vegetables, is brought to a full boil over a fire. But instead of leaving it simmering for hours, the pot is quickly removed from the heat, tightly covered, and nestled into a box packed with insulating hay. The box is closed, and then nothing. No more fuel, no more fire, no more attention needed. The magic happens in the insulated environment. The hay or straw, wool blankets, or other insulating materials traps the heat that's already in the pot. This captured heat continues cooking the food for anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. It's like having a slow cooker that uses no electricity whatsoever. The fuel savings are remarkable. Compared to traditional simmering, Haybox cooking uses up to 80% less fuel. In a world where the Amish must collect, chop, and store every piece of firewood they use, this efficiency isn't just convenient, it's essential. Modern homesteaders trying this method report similar savings on their utility bills. Who wouldn't want to cut their cooking energy use by 4/5? Temperature science makes Haybox cooking particularly suitable for beef. The method maintains temperatures between 160 to 180 degrees for several hours, exactly the range needed to break down tough collagen in beef without drying out the meat. The gradual cooling creates meat so tender you barely need teeth to eat it. Those cheaper, tougher cuts that might challenge your jaw when cooked quickly become meltingly tender in a haybox. Modern Amish hayboxes have evolved from simple straw-lined crates to more sophisticated designs. Many are wooden boxes built with double walls, the space between filled with wool blankets or clean straw. The most efficient have snug-fitting lids that create nearly airtight seals, preventing heat from escaping upward. The haybox offers benefits beyond fuel savings. Since food can't burn in a haybox, the temperature only decreases, never increases. It allows Amish families to attend church services or work in fields without worrying about cooking disasters. The set-it-and-forget-it approach predates electric slow cookers by centuries, but accomplishes the same goal. Summer and winter call for different insulation materials. Hay, despite giving the method its name, works better in winter due to its greater insulating properties. During warmer months, straw becomes the preferred material, providing adequate insulation without overheating. This seasonal adjustment shows how finely tuned the system is. The cooking method also encourages specific food preparation techniques. Vegetables are cut slightly larger than normal since they'll have hours to soften. Meat is often seared before boiling to develop flavor compounds that will distribute throughout the long cooking time. These small adjustments maximize the effectiveness of the thermal retention process. Despite its simplicity, haybox cooking requires certain knowledge. The food must reach a complete boil before being transferred to the haybox. No shortcuts allowed. The transfer from fire to box must happen quickly to preserve heat. An Amish grandmother was once asked how critical timing was in this transfer and replied, "So quick that my husband thinks I'm nodding yes every time I move from stove to haybox." And the box shouldn't be opened until cooking time is complete, as each peak releases precious heat and extends cooking time. Perhaps most surprising is how this ancient method addresses modern concerns. In an age of energy consciousness, haybox cooking offers an almost carbon-neutral way to prepare meals. The minimal fuel used to bring food to initial boiling temperature is offset by the zero-energy cooking that follows. It's sustainability, wrapped in simplicity. As evening chores finish and families gather around food that's been quietly cooking itself all day, someone might mention another cooking method that requires even less equipment than the haybox. After all, nature provides plenty of cooking vessels if you know how to use them. Why not wrap your next meal in cabbage leaves or corn husks and cook it directly in the fire's embrace? Before aluminum foil and parchment paper, people had to get creative with cooking containers. The Amish held on to these ancient techniques while the rest of us forgot them. Their methods turn ordinary plants and even clay into natural cooking vessels that add flavor while solving practical cooking problems. Cabbage leaves might not look special in your refrigerator drawer, but they transform into remarkable cooking tools in Amish kitchens. Large outer leaves become natural food wraps that withstand direct fire contact without disintegrating. Unlike modern wrapping materials, cabbage adds nutritional value as it cooks, infusing the beef with vitamins K, C, and B6. The slightly sweet flavor that develops during cooking complements meat perfectly, creating a taste combination that no manufactured wrapper could replicate. The technique is deceptively straightforward. Beef is seasoned, sometimes mixed with grains or chopped vegetables, then wrapped in blanched cabbage leaves. The packets are secured with butcher string or thin strips of the cabbage rib itself. These neat bundles can be placed directly into hot coals, where they steam from the inside while getting kissed by fire from the outside. Clay wrapping takes this concept even further. Raw clay, simple mud from the earth, becomes an impromptu oven when packed around seasoned beef. The clay hardens during cooking, creating a sealed environment that steams the meat in its own juices. Breaking open the clay shell after cooking becomes a moment of culinary drama, releasing aromas trapped during the cooking process. The meat inside emerges perfectly tender, having been protected from direct flames while still receiving heat through the clay barrier. Corn husks offer yet another natural wrapper option. Unlike cabbage or clay, corn husks must be soaked before use to prevent burning. The Amish waste nothing from their corn harvest. While the kernels go to human consumption or animal feed, the husks perform this valuable secondary role in cooking. The husks impart subtle corn flavor while creating a steamy environment that keeps beef moist throughout cooking. When unwrapped, the food emerges fully cooked with no burning, even after sitting directly in the fire. The wrapping methods aren't just culinary curiosities, they're practical solutions to real cooking challenges. The natural moisture retention in these wrappers works wonders on tougher, less expensive cuts of beef. A tough chuck roast that might be chewy when roasted conventionally becomes fall-apart tender when cooked in wrappings. The steam-like environment created inside these natural packages breaks down connective tissues without drying out the meat. Different Amish communities have developed regional variations based on local plant availability. Some use grape leaves similar to Mediterranean dolmas. Others employ wild leaves like basswood or maple, each adding subtle flavor notes to the final dish. In areas where particular plants are abundant, cooking traditions evolve to make use of what nature provided freely. The cooking times in wrappings tend to be shorter than you might expect. While clay packages might need an hour or more, cabbage-wrapped smaller portions can cook in as little as 20 minutes. The insulating properties of the wrapping materials, combined with the moisture they trap, create highly efficient cooking environments that reduce overall cooking time compared to open fire methods. These wrapping techniques shine particularly when cooking outdoors or away from established kitchen setups. No pots or pans needed, just the wrapping material and a fire. This simplicity made these methods valuable during farming activities far from home or during travel between communities, when carrying cooking equipment would be impractical. The Amish appreciation for minimizing waste shows clearly in these methods. The cabbage wrapper becomes part of the meal. Clay returns to the earth. Corn husks can be dried and reused for animal bedding or composted. An Amish farmer was once asked about his community's minimal waste cooking methods compared to modern disposable wrappers. He scratched his beard thoughtfully and replied, "In our community, the only thing that should be wrapped in foil is the lightning rod on the barn." Temperature control seems like it would be challenging when cooking directly in fire, but the wrappings themselves provide protection. The natural moisture in plant wrappings keeps the internal temperature from exceeding boiling point until that moisture evaporates. This built-in temperature regulation helps prevent overcooking even with imprecise heat sources. While the world depends on freezers, the Amish rely on wisdom. Their age-old methods, smoking, salting, and storing, keep meat safe for decades. In a time of power cuts and waste, their way quietly proves that simplicity still outlasts technology.